Have you ever stopped for a moment, looked at the way you react to situations, the way you think, the fears you harbor in silence, and wondered, whose voice is that inside my head? Is it truly yours, or was it placed there long before you were old enough to question it, before you had words to speak, before you even knew what a self was? There's a peculiar truth about the human condition. We grow up believing we are the architects of our choices, the authors of our desires. But what if the person you think you are was programmed before you ever had a say in it, not by some faceless society, not by mass media or government conspiracies, but by the very people who held you in their arms, kissed you goodnight, and whispered to you about who you should be? Your mother, your first emotional compass, your earliest mirror to the world. Carl Jung once said, "The greatest burden a child must bear is the unlived life of its parents." What if the ideas, the fears, the limitations you carry aren't yours at all? What if they're fragments of someone else's unlived dreams, someone else's unresolved fears, quietly transferred to you under the illusion of love, protection, and care? Think about it. Why do you recoil from confrontation while your sibling rushes headfirst into it? Why does one child grow up craving approval while another walks defiantly against the grain? It isn't because one is brave and the other weak. It's because long before you could choose what to believe, what to fear, and what to desire, someone had already written the code of your psyche. Imagine a mother who, in her youth, faced ridicule for speaking her mind. She learns that silence is safer than truth. She grows, she carries this belief like a shield. Then she has a child, not through conscious instruction, but through subtle gestures, a furrowed brow when you speak too loudly, a tightening of the lips when you express an unpopular thought. She passes her fear to you. You learn without knowing you're learning that to be silent is to be safe, and so the program is installed. By the time you're old enough to question it, you no longer recognize it as foreign. It feels like you. It is you, but it isn't. Carl Jung dedicated much of his work to unearthing these invisible threads, the inherited psychic patterns that shape us before our conscious mind awakens. He called them complexes. Psychic fragments built from forgotten moments, ancestral fears, unfulfilled hopes, passed through generations like family heirlooms you didn't ask for. And perhaps no relationship leaves a deeper imprint than that between mother and child, not because of some sinister intention, but because in those earliest years, a mother's mind is the world. Her fears become yours, her boundaries become your prison. Her dreams become the only ones you're permitted to have. This isn't a story about blame. It's a story about awakening, about recognizing the difference between who you are and who you were trained to be. And that difference, as Jung would argue, is where true freedom begins. So let me ask you, how much of your life, your choices, your anxieties, your relationships, it have been steered by a silent program installed before you ever had the power to say no? When you flinch at rejection, when you sabotage a good relationship, when you work yourself to the bone for validation you no longer need, whose voice are you obeying? Is it the cautious voice of your mother's fear? The silent judgment of a culture she inherited and passed down? Or is it your own? Do you even know the sound of your own voice anymore? In this video, we're going to descend into the depths of Jungian psychology, where the boundaries between the self and the other blur, and we realize how little of ourselves we actually chose. We'll explore the concept of the mother complex, the idea that long before we could choose our values, the emotional atmosphere we were raised in shaped them for us. We'll uncover how society, too, weaponizes these early imprints, turning us into predictable consumers, compliant citizens, and obedient souls who never question why we want what we want. And finally, we'll talk about how to reclaim what was taken, how to dismantle the silent program, because somewhere beneath those inherited fears and expectations is a self you've never met, a self waiting to be remembered. So if you've ever felt like a stranger in your own life, if you've ever sensed that your thoughts weren't truly yours, that your reactions came from a script you don't remember, agreeing to stay with me, the descent begins now. Carl Jung was never a man content with surface-level answers. He believed that if you truly want to understand a person, you cannot simply ask them what they think or what they want, because most people are unaware of what forces actually move them. He wrote, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate." The unconscious, in Jung's view, isn't a chaotic void of forgotten memories, but a structured realm, layered with inherited psychic material, fragments of your ancestors' beliefs, your culture's myths, and your parents' unresolved wounds. He called these inherited patterns complexes, emotionally charged clusters of ideas and images that exist just beneath our awareness, shaping our thoughts, desires, and fears. And perhaps no complex is more potent, more defining than the one built by your mother. In Jungian psychology, the mother complex isn't simply about your relationship with your literal mother. It represents the earliest psychological imprint you receive, the emotional blueprint through which you learn to perceive yourself, others, and the world. From the moment you're born, you are not yet a self. You are a bundle of raw instincts, biological urges, and unformed potential. Your mother's mind, her fears, her needs, her beliefs, acts as the first framework you inhabit. If she's anxious, you learn vigilance. If she's emotionally absent, you learn to become invisible. If she demands perfection, you internalize shame at every flaw. Jung observed that long before we develop language or conscious memory, our mother's psyche envelops us like an atmosphere. She teaches you without words what is safe and what is forbidden. And here's the unnerving part. You don't remember learning these lessons, but you live by them. Consider Sarah, a woman in her 30s, constantly drained, always available for others, endlessly giving yet perpetually unfulfilled. Why does Sarah find it impossible to say no? Why does she feel crushing guilt at the idea of putting herself first? The answer isn't in her adult experiences. It's buried in a silent agreement she made as a child. Sarah's mother, emotionally fragile and burdened by an unhappy marriage, unconsciously turned her daughter into an emotional caretaker. When mother cried, Sarah would comfort. When mother despaired, Sarah became the bright, cheerful distraction, and so the program was installed. Your needs don't matter. Your worth comes from soothing others. Sarah grew up, but the complex didn't. Here's where Jung's philosophy slices through modern self-help cliches. Most people believe they are the authors of their preferences. They think I'm shy or I'm ambitious because that's just who I am. But what Jung reveals is that your personality, as you know it, was largely shaped before you possessed a conscious I. The values you hold, the people you gravitate toward, the desires that keep you up at night, most of them were inherited through the emotional field of your earliest environment. You were programmed before you ever had a choice. And unless you make those unconscious programs visible, you will live not as yourself, but as the echo of your mother's unlived life. Take another example. James. James prides himself on being a rebel, anti-authority, anti-establishment, always playing the contrarian. On the surface, it seems like James is radically free, but dig deeper and you find his mother, a controlling, hypercritical woman whose approval he could never win. As a child, the only power James felt was in resistance. He learned that defiance equaled survival. Now, decades later, every relationship, every job, every conversation is filtered through this old program: rebel or be crushed. James isn't free, he's obeying a script, unwritten before he knew what freedom was, the mechanics of psychic inheritance. So how does this invisible programming work? It's not about explicit commands, it's about emotional atmosphere. Neuroscience today confirms what Jung intuited. In your earliest years, your brain's primary mode is absorption. The limbic system, responsible for emotional learning, is hyperactive, while your rational faculties haven't yet developed. You don't logically analyze, you feel. You sense danger in your mother's tight embrace. You associate love with distance when your attempts for closeness are met with withdrawal. And these emotional impressions bypass language, embedding themselves directly into your unconscious. Later, you'll call it instinct, but it's programming. She married a man who demanded endless emotional labor. She worked in a job where boundaries blurred and overextension was praised. Each time she neglected herself, she felt a strange sense of peace, as though she was doing what she was born for. But this was not selflessness. It was conditioning. Now, here's a chilling truth. The people who programmed you weren't villains. They were wounded, incomplete, haunted by their own unresolved complexes. Your mother's attempts to mold you weren't acts of control, but survival strategies she adopted from her own upbringing. In trying to protect you from her fears, she handed them to you. Don't trust people, they'll hurt you. Success will make you unlovable. Never be too proud or you'll be punished. These weren't lessons, they were warnings, born not from malice but from unhealed wounds. Modern research backs Jung's insights in astonishing ways. Studies in epigenetics, the science of how behavior and environment can alter gene expression, reveal that trauma and stress can leave biological marks passed down through generations. On study, descendants of Holocaust survivors were found to have altered stress hormone profiles, even though they didn't directly experience the trauma. The past lives inside you, not metaphorically, biologically. Your emotional patterns aren't just psychological, they're cellular. If our fears, desires, and instincts were programmed long before we had agency, what then is freedom? Jung argued that true freedom doesn't come from acting out your impulses, but from making the unconscious conscious, to become aware of the invisible strings moving you, to meet the ghost of your mother within you, to confront the unlived lives you're still obeying. Only then can you choose, not by rejecting your past, but by integrating it, by recognizing where you end and someone else's programming begins. This is where Jung's process of individuation begins. Individuation is the psychological process of becoming a whole, autonomous individual, of peeling away the inherited layers to uncover the authentic self beneath. It involves confronting your complexes, unearthing your unconscious motives, and integrating the disowned parts of yourself. For Sarah, it means learning to tolerate guilt when setting boundaries. For James, it means realizing that not every authority figure is an enemy. For you, it might mean admitting that the life you're chasing was never yours to begin with, and that's terrifying, because as Jung warns, people will do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid facing their own souls. But here's the thing. The program isn't invincible, the script isn't unchangeable, and in the next part of this journey, we're going to pull back the curtain even further. We'll confront the ways society exploits these early imprints, how culture, media, and relationships capitalize on your programming to keep you predictable, obedient, and spiritually numb. Because it isn't just your mother's voice in your head. It's the voices of 1,000 generations, 1,000 fears, 1,000 unspoken rules, and unless you see them, you'll obey them. Not because you must, but because you won't know you're doing it. Imagine for a moment that you wake up in a room where every wall is a mirror. But here's the trick. These mirrors don't reflect you. They reflect who you were taught to be. And every day, every interaction, every advertisement, every relationship is a mirror reinforcing that image. This is not a metaphor. Carl Jung believed that our unconscious programs are not random, isolated patterns. They are the very building blocks of social order. Your earliest programming doesn't just shape your inner world. It makes you useful to the systems that benefit from your unconscious obedience. Think of Sarah again. The woman programmed to believe her worth is measured by how much she sacrifices. What happens when a society tells her, good mothers put their families first? A strong woman can do it all without complaining. Self-care is selfish. She complies, not out of conscious agreement, but because it feels familiar. It feels like home. And when she begins to break under the weight of it, what does society sell her? A scented candle, a spa weekend, a self-help book urging her to lean in harder. Her suffering is converted into profit. The rebel is still a pawn. And what about James, the rebel, the man who defines himself by his defiance? You might imagine he escaped the program, but here's the catch. Society knows how to monetize rebellion too. Counterculture becomes fashion. Anarchy becomes a marketing strategy. Defiance gets packaged into slogans. James believes he's free because he opposes authority, but in truth, he's just reacting to it. His identity is still tethered to the system, because to rebel against something is still to be controlled by it. The program evolves, but it never dissolves. Now comes an unsettling question. What if most of what you believe to be your choices were made for you before you could speak? Your career ambitions, your romantic patterns, your fears about money, your relationship with power, authority, and intimacy. They didn't arrive by accident. They were seeded by your earliest caregivers, then reinforced by a culture designed to reward conformity and punish deviation. You were taught to fear rejection, to crave validation, to associate worth with productivity. These aren't personal quirks, they're survival strategies, inherited from a world where belonging was life and exile meant death. And while the world has changed, the wiring hasn't. Psychologists like John Bowlby and Mary Ainsworth demonstrated that early attachment patterns, the way your caregivers responded to your needs, form the blueprint for how you relate to everything. If love was conditional, you chase approval. If affection was scarce, you settle for crumbs. If safety was unreliable, you stay hypervigilant. But here's the sinister part. Modern systems rely on these wounds. A person who needs approval is a loyal employee. A person terrified of rejection is a predictable voter. A person addicted to external validation is a perpetual consumer. Your insecurity isn't a flaw, it's profitable. Carl Jung warned about one particular programming pattern, the compulsive giver. Society venerates the emotionally available, the selfless, the endlessly giving. But Jung saw through this. He understood that unexamined emotional availability is not virtue. It's self-erasure. It's a survival tactic learned by children of emotionally unstable, critical, or neglectful caregivers. If you're always available, always soothing, always accommodating, you're less likely to be abandoned. And society loves this, because people who can't say no are easy to exploit. Your overgiving becomes a virtue signal, while your depletion is dismissed. You're so strong. I don't know how you do it all. These are not compliments. They're chains. One of the most effective tools for preserving the program is guilt. Notice how quickly guilt surfaces when you set a boundary, speak an unpopular truth, or prioritize your well-being. You were conditioned to believe that self-preservation equals selfishness. This is no accident. A society built on productivity and consumption depends on people who feel too guilty to rest, too ashamed to question, and too insecure to withdraw their energy. And so, from childhood onward, guilt is weaponized. What will people think? After everything I've done for you? Don't be so difficult. These phrases are not innocent. They are psychic shackles. Consider Mia, a 42-year-old mother of 3. Mia is praised endlessly for her devotion. Soccer practice, homemade meals, spotless house, late-night emotional support. But Mia is dying inside. She has no identity outside her family, no private desires, no space untouched by obligation. When she tries to claim time for herself, to write, to travel, to simply be alone, the guilt is crushing. Not just from others, from within. Why? Because Mia's own mother modeled martyrdom as love. And so, Mia internalized a deadly equation. Love, self-sacrifice. Society rewards Mia's exhaustion. It applauds her disappearance, and when she breaks, it will sell her therapy, medication, and inspirational slogans. But it will never question the culture that made her suffering inevitable. At the heart of this programming lies a primal terror, abandonment. Jung believed one of the deepest fears in the human psyche is the fear of exile, of being cast out, unseen, unloved. This fear isn't irrational, it's ancient. For most of human history, survival meant belonging. To be alone was to die. And though modern life no longer demands tribal interdependence, your nervous system hasn't evolved beyond it. The guilt you feel when setting boundaries, the anxiety when standing out, the panic at disappointing others, these are echoes of ancestral terror, and society exploits them masterfully by threatening social exclusion through shame, criticism, or subtle withdrawal. It keeps you in line. It ensures you continue to perform the role your program demands. And here's the final, most sinister twist. The more emotionally available you are, the more you erase yourself to please others, the more invisible you become. Jung wrote extensively about this paradox. The person who constantly gives, constantly pleases, and constantly conforms eventually ceases to exist in the eyes of others as a person. They become a utility, a means to, an end. Sarah isn't loved. She's useful. James isn't respected. He's a predictable antagonist. Mia isn't cherished. She's depended upon. This is the true cost of unconscious programming. You become invisible to others, and worse, to yourself. Carl Jung believed that beneath every complex, every persona, every inherited role, lies the shadow. The part of you that refuses to be programmed, the part that hungers for freedom, for solitude, for a life dictated, not by inherited guilt, but by authentic desire. The shadow whispers in moments of exhaustion, in dreams you can't explain, in the quiet ache of an unsatisfying life, and if ignored too long, it turns destructive. It sabotages relationships, it incites depression, it drives compulsions, not because it wants to harm you, but because it wants to wake you. The shadow is your soul's rebellion against inherited scripts, and until you face it, the program runs. What if everything you believed about yourself, your personality, your desires, your fears, wasn't truly yours? Not your need to be liked, not your craving for approval, not your fear of conflict, not your reluctance to rest. Carl Jung once wrote, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." This is the moment it hits you. The patterns you thought were personal quirks, the emotional loops you chalked up to bad luck, the toxic relationships you kept attracting, they weren't accidents, they weren't fate. They were the program. Programmed before you could speak, before you could reason, before you even understood what it meant to be you. You inherited beliefs about love from a mother who didn't love herself. You inherited anxieties about money from a father who lived in quiet desperation. You inherited shame around your body, your voice, your ambitions, from a society that profits off your self-doubt. And here's the devastating truth. Even your resistance, your rebellion, your refusal to conform was anticipated. The program accounts for outliers. It knows some will rebel, It knows others will numb out. It knows some will drown in perfectionism, while others spiral into chaos. It doesn't matter. As long as you remain unconscious, the program wins, because whether you obey or resist, if you're reacting, you're still controlled. And now, the final, piercing realization. The more emotionally available you are without discernment, the more you pour yourself into others to feel needed, the more you bend, appease, accommodate, the more you vanish. People don't love what's always there. They don't cherish what's endlessly giving. They stop seeing you. You become a mirror for their needs, their wounds, their desires. Your own reflection disappears. And this is the tragic irony Jung understood. The person who gives everything, hoping to be loved, is often the one left most alone, not because they're unlovable, but because they've become invisible, a phantom of themselves. The program doesn't survive by force. It survives by convincing you that self-sacrifice is virtue, that exhaustion is strength, that invisibility is nobility. It weaponizes your goodness against you, and until you see this, until you confront the unconscious contracts you inherited, you will remain trapped inside a life that isn't yours. This, right here, is the point of no return. Now you know.